Paris, August 1572. The bells of Notre Dame rang out, and the streets glowed with banners, silks, and torchlight. It was meant to be a day of celebration, a wedding that promised peace after decades of civil war. Catherine de Medici, Queen Mother of France, had orchestrated the marriage of her daughter, Margaret of Valois, to the Protestant prince, Henry of Navarre. To the world, it was a symbol of unity between Catholic and Protestant factions. But beneath the music and perfume, beneath the feasts and laughter, Catherine was already preparing something darker. Within days, the bells that rang for celebration would toll for slaughter. What began as a royal wedding would descend into one of the most infamous massacres in European history. The stage was set by decades of blood. France in the mid-1500s was a nation divided by faith. The Protestant minority, known as the Huguenots, had clashed again and again with the Catholic majority, leaving villages burned and nobles assassinated. Catherine, mother of King Charles IX, knew the crown was fragile, so she devised a brilliant deception: use a marriage to lure her enemies to Paris. Chroniclers, such as Pierre de l'Estoile, and memoirists, like Margaret of Valois herself, would later recall the tension that lingered even during the celebrations. On August 18, 1572, Henry of Navarre and Margaret of Valois were wed outside Notre Dame Cathedral. The atmosphere was forced but radiant. Nobles from across France, both Catholic and Protestant, had come to witness what many believed would end the wars of religion. The Huguenot leader, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny himself, walked proudly through the streets, cheered by his Protestant allies. To him, this wedding was a promise that France might finally turn toward peace. But to Catherine de Medici, it was an opportunity. Just days after the ceremony, Coligny was shot by an assassin's bullet as he walked back from a council meeting. Though wounded, he survived. But the attempt revealed the truth. Someone wanted the Protestant leaders dead. Suspicion swirled through the streets of Paris, and all eyes turned to the Queen Mother. Some chroniclers claim Catherine herself whispered into her son Charles's ear that night, telling him that the Protestants planned to overthrow him, and that they must strike first. Whatever was said, by August 23rd the decision had been made. At dawn, Paris would run with blood. The night before the massacre was eerily silent. Protestant nobles, still gathered in the city for the wedding festivities, slept unaware of the storm about to break. Then, in the darkness of August 24th, St. Bartholomew's Day, the church bells of Paris began to ring. It was the signal. The guards of the king, joined by armed Catholic citizens, swept into the streets. Their first target was Admiral Coligny. Bursting into his chamber, they cut him down and threw his body from the window, where the Duke of Guise waited below. But the killing did not end there. What began as an assassination turned into a frenzy. The narrow streets of Paris filled with screams, the clash of steel, and the pounding of doors. Protestant nobles were dragged from their beds and cut down in the gutters. Entire families were slaughtered. Chroniclers estimate that in Paris alone, between 2,000 and 3,000 Huguenots were killed in those days. And as the news spread, so too did the violence. Across France, in Lyon, Rouen, Bordeaux, and Toulouse massacres erupted, bringing the total death toll to perhaps 10,000 to 30,000 lives lost. Catherine de Medici's role has been debated for centuries. Some claim she was the mastermind, pulling the strings to eliminate Protestant leaders in one swift blow. Others suggest she merely set events in motion, and that mob violence carried it further than even she expected. But her presence on that wedding day cannot be erased. She had invited her enemies into her home, made them believe in peace, and then turned their celebration into their grave. Even those within her own family left chilling accounts. Margaret of Valois, the bride herself, later wrote in her memoirs of how she was awakened in the night by screams and pounding on her chamber door. A Huguenot gentleman, covered in blood, rushed inside seeking protection. She hid him, saving his life for a time. But outside her chamber, she recalled, the courtyards of the Louvre were filled with the corpses of the slain. The massacre scarred Europe. Protestants across the continent saw it as proof that Catholics could not be trusted. In England, Queen Elizabeth I, herself a Protestant monarch, wept with fury when she learned of the slaughter. Pamphlets, woodcuts, and paintings spread the story of Paris drenched in blood. The marriage that was supposed to heal France had instead widened the wound beyond repair. Catherine de Medici remained Queen Mother until her death in 1589, a survivor in a court of shifting loyalties. To some, she was a brilliant strategist who held a fragile kingdom together. To others, she was the serpent at the heart of the Valois dynasty, a woman who could use a wedding feast as bait for a massacre. And so, history remembers the wedding of 1572 not for its vows of love, but for the bells of Paris that rang out to signal one of the darkest betrayals in European history, a queen mother who promised peace but delivered slaughter. So the next time you hear of Catherine de Medici, do not think first of her poisons, her astrologers, or her intrigue. Think of that August night in Paris, when a wedding became a massacre, and when joy turned to terror in the space of a single bell. If this story left you unsettled, there are countless more tales buried in the chronicles of history. Stories where power and cruelty walked hand in hand. Subscribe to this channel and join us as we continue to uncover the darkest corners of the past.